The context to your life will decide how your life turns out. The context that you are living your life inside of will literally determine what you see, what you hear, what you feel, and what you don't see, don't hear, and don't feel. It will determine, the context of your life will determine what you will be attracted to and what is attracted to you, who and what is attracted to you. It will determine your ability and your desire to work through challenges and difficulties and find solutions that reach the other side and actually have a benefit that is for the greater good of all concerned. Or the context of your life may determine that you take the most efficient, short, and unethical way that does the greatest harm to other people and to yourself, that will have a short-term gratification at the cost of long-term happiness and fulfillment. All of those things are decided by the context through which you view your life and through which you live your life. So I'll say some more about what is a context by way of explaining. Life is just happening. And so to create a metaphor, it's like water. Water is just water. Sometimes it's steam, sometimes it's droplets falling down, sometimes it's an ocean. But water is formless and shapeless, and it takes the shape of whatever vessel is holding it. So if I pour water into this cup, it will take the shape of this cup. If it's a big bowl, it'll take the shape. If it has no context or no vessel to hold it, it runs all over in every direction and evaporates and disperses and becomes another form. Water is like your life. If your life is held inside of a context, that means it is limited, but you have consciously limited it. You have designed the context for your life. And so you're not a prisoner of it, you are a disciplinarian or a master of it. Anybody that wants to master something must create a context for their life in order to master anything. If you want to be a master piano player, that means there are certain things that you do, whether you want to or not, whether you like it or not, whether you feel like it or not, and there are certain things that you don't do, and so you make certain sacrifices in order to achieve your goal of being a master piano player. And it may mean that, certainly I've known a couple of master piano players, and I've lived with a couple of them in the house when I lived in France. And that guy is a master, and he played the scales thousands of times, I think a day, at least 1,000 times a day. He went through the scales all up and down, the same exercises over and over and over and over and over again, whether he wanted to or not. We would go out and do fantastic things all over the French countryside, but, when we'd come back home, we would approach the house and he would be playing his scales. Now, that was his desire and his choice. Nobody made him do it, okay? He became a master of piano, and he's mastered many instruments since then, and he makes the most incredible, gorgeous music for movies. And you've heard some of it. If you've watched enough movies, you've eventually heard some of his music. And that's how he supports his family, and that's what gives meaning and depth and beauty to his life. Okay? So that's one person that chose to be a master pianist, for example, a master musician and composer. But what is it that you choose to master? It could be just mastering being a human being, for God's sakes. It could be mastering being a husband or a father or a mother or a lover or a teacher. It could be mastering whatever it is your chosen job or career is, whether it's an art or being an engineer, or being anything that you choose to master will give a context to your life. Now, you may want to master relationships. This is something that I chose to take on, and, I'm still working on it. I'm still developing it. I'm still growing in it every day. like I said, just because you master something or just because you become very good at something or you become transformed doesn't mean that you never run into challenges, doesn't mean that you don't have the next thing to grow into all the time. So context is literally created by creating it. There's no trick to it. There's no magic thing. There's no like magic formula. You create a context by creating it. Literally, in your speaking, in your imagining, you must speak it. You need to recognize, first of all, that you have this power to create context. It comes with you. It's just part of who you are. No one's going to give it to you. You can't go get it someplace. There's no teacher or guru that can say, now you have the power of context. You always have had it. You have the power of context. And it begins with recognizing that you have the power of context. That's what we mean by self-empowerment. You have the power of context. And then you simply need to be willing to be responsible for having created the context yourself. Most of us are living inside of a context that was created for us by somebody else, often before we were ever born, by people that we'll never meet. Many of us were born into context, and I'm going to say most of you, most of me too, have been born into a context that was given before you were born. Boys are like this. Girls are like this. Men have these rights and tendencies and privileges, and women have these rights and tendencies and privileges. And, you know, if you are a Muslim, you have this. And if you are a Jew, you have this. And if you're a Christian, you're like that. And if you're a Buddhist, you're like that. And if you're a Baha'i, you're like that. And if you're a Republican, you're like that. And if you're a Democrat, you're like that. The contexts are all around you all the time. If you were born into a wealthy family, we're like this. Right? Our family is like this. A context is created before you were born that you were born into and inherited, and it was taught to you. You didn't come with that. It was given to you by outsiders who were in charge of training you and developing you so that you could operate inside of a context. If you're Iranian, you operate inside this context. If you're black, you operate inside this context. If you're white, you operate like that. If you're an American Indian, it's like this. And they don't even question it. No one's ever questioned it. You didn't question it, did you? Maybe when you were in your teens, you began to question things, but that either you grew up and become independent and you took on making a change in the world, or eventually they say you outgrew that, which means you came back to the old context that you were given in the first place. You know, that's what parents mean when they say, oh, they finally grew out of that and now, you know, they've become more mature. That's what they mean by mature. It means that you've given up resisting the context that you were born into. Okay? So you have to be willing to be responsible for having created your own context yourself with no reason at all, with no props and no evidence. No props or no evidence. You have to really, this is talking about standing alone, even if for a brief moment, and saying, this shall be, because I said so. With no evidence, no props, no agreement, no one voting for you, you know, no one saying, yeah, no cheerleaders, nothing. Just simply, this shall be. And declaring yourself that you have the power with your own words, in your own universe, in your own world, that you have the power to determine the context of your own life. And you do. You always have had that power. I know that you've been told that you don't. I know that you've been taught by religions and philosophers and school teachers and mothers and fathers that things are the way they are and that you don't have a choice about it. Well, I'm here to tell you that you do, and you always have had the choice about who will be responsible for creating the context for your life. And listen, it doesn't mean that other people will necessarily like it or agree with it. It doesn't necessarily mean that anybody's going to get up behind you and give you a large sum of money and support you in doing it. You may have to just go out and do it yourself. But you have the power to create the context for your own life, to give your life its meaning. In other words, you give the meaning to your life. The meaning doesn't come from the outside. It never has. Meaning does not come from outside. Things happen, and then we make it mean things, but like a reaction, a response. It's not, I'm going to take the word response out. I'm going to say react. Okay? When something happens and then you have a reaction, like an automatic way of being that reacts to something that's happened from the outside, that's called a reaction. Okay? Responsibility means ability to respond. So something comes from the outside, you saw it coming because you're responsible for what? You're responsible for the meaning of your life. Therefore, you're responsible for how you respond to what happens in your life. So it doesn't mean that you control everything that's happening in the random and capricious universe, but it means that you have something to say about how you will respond and reply to the stimuli that comes from the outside world, because you have created a context for your life. Now that context may be, I am a man of peace. Could also be, I'm a warrior. It could be, I'm a person who loves and seeks to understand the inner meaning of the things that happen in my life. So you may be introspective. You may have something that happens that is unpleasant or unplanned, or a surprise that doesn't work for you. And it may cause you to become thoughtful about what does this mean in my life, and how can I best make use of this incident so that I can grow and develop and have the best outcome for all concerned. That's a possible context that you could create for your own life. Now, I'm sharing with you in the process of this talk some of the context that I may have created at different times in my own life. And by the way, when you are responsible for creating the context or the meaning of your life, are you stuck with it? I don't think so. I think that my experience tells me that once you create a context for your life, that context may sometimes become fulfilled. You actually may fulfill a certain context in your life and then grow beyond that. Okay? There was a time in my life where the greatest context that I had for myself was that I wanted to become a famous dancer. I wanted to become a dancer in a dance company in New York City. And that was the biggest context I had for my life. If you asked me what my life was about, it wasn't about anything else, just that. I didn't care what I had to do that. I was going to do that. And I didn't care if it meant that I had to work day and night. I didn't care if it meant that I had to go without food. I didn't care if it meant that I had to live in a little tiny apartment. I didn't care if it meant that I had to ride a bicycle or walk or ride a bus or the subway. I didn't care about anything but that. And the entire context of my life was dedicated to that, and everything else was incidental. If I got hurt, if I got injured, it didn't matter. What happened in my life, and everything that happened in my life, I used it as fuel to become this. And consequently, within a 3-year period of having never danced before in my entire life, starting dance at the age of 21, when everybody else in my class started when they were 7 or 8, as children, I went to the top of the class. I got drafted into the company. I started doing 200 shows a year in theaters and stages all over the world. And in other words, my focus on this context of my life was so potent and so single-focused that that's all that mattered. Now, did it mean that I was a good person or that I was nice or that I was pleasant to be around? I don't know. I really don't. I probably wasn't. I was single focused. I wasn't interested in making a lot of friends. I wasn't interested in being popular or anything like that. I was only interested in perfecting something, getting very, very good at something, and I did. Now, my point about telling that story is not to tell you about my personal history. The point of me telling you this story was in my own experience that got fulfilled. There was a certain point in my life at which, when you do 200 shows a year for several years, that's a lot of shows, that's a lot of changing costumes, that's a lot of going out on stages, that's a lot of standing ovations, that's a lot of applause, that's a lot of autographs, that's a lot of flying all over the world and being in different places and meeting a lot of people. In other words, that got fulfilled. There was a point at which it was like, okay, I did that. That's kind of enough. I mean, like it's, my hunger for that is no longer. And I wanted something deeper in my life, more meaning. And I wanted to teach some of the things that I had learned in all of those years of becoming a dancer and then fulfilling that. I had learned a lot of things. I had accumulated a lot of physical and mental and emotional and spiritual and neurological knowledge. I had learned a lot about the body and the spirit and the mind and the focus and the central nervous system and muscles and the brain and how that works and programming yourself. I learned a lot of things, and I wanted to begin to share that with people, so I began to teach. I moved to Paris, and I taught a school of dance and theater and martial arts. In the meantime, I had gotten 2 black belts in 2 different martial arts, and so I had a lot of things to teach. And I'd also studied some acting and with a couple of studios in New York. And so I began to take this into the world, and I wanted to teach. So that became the context for my life, was how can I share this with other people? Now, in many ways, you could say that me being here today has everything to do with that shift in my perspective or the context for my life. I began to shift the focus of, instead of trying to get something for myself that I wanted, which was this being a dancer thing, and these abilities, I wanted that for me. And it began to shift for, how could I give this to others? How could I share this with others? And I guess I could say that I've been doing that ever since. I opened this school in Paris when I was about 27, 28 years old. And that's been close to 40, almost 40 years ago. It's been 30, 35 years ago, something like that. Okay, so I've been doing this for a long time in various forms. And I began teaching seminars and workshops and daily classes at that school in Paris called Espace Futura for a number of years. And I've been teaching some form of mind expanding or transformational technology ever since. So that is a context that has shaped my life. Had I just stayed with the context that I started with, I don't know, maybe I would still be a dancer. I would be an old dancer, maybe, who knows, right? There's people who I know that were in that company at the same time that I was, and I don't know what they've become. I really don't. Different ones are doing different things. They own different businesses, but they're not dancers anymore. And my point is, you're not stuck with a context. Once you create a context, if it's powerful enough and you decide to do it and you choose only that, then everything that you do becomes a part of that. Eventually, that will be fulfilled. And you may or may not move on to a greater context. It should open doors to greater contexts in your life. And you don't have to keep expanding. However, if you recall, I said in the beginning of the show, you're either always expanding and growing, or you're diminishing and dying. So the context for my life now, and what I recommend for your life, is that you begin to choose a context that brings you happiness, fulfillment, that's juicy, that you're excited, that you loved getting up in the morning and doing that you love talking about, that you love sharing with other people, that you see it makes a difference in other people's lives, and that will call you forward. If you're having to drag yourself out of bed and force yourself to go to work and make a living and get through another day of your relationship, or get through another day of your job, or get through another day of your health situation so that you survive your health instead of having your health exploding out of you like well-being, then I'm going to assert and back up with evidence that you are living in too small of a context. You do not have a context in your life that is big enough to include all of the little mishaps and uncomfortable things that happen in your life. If you have a context that's big enough that includes humanity, then it will be big enough to include, you would have room in your, if a context was a basket, let's say a context, earlier I talked about a context being like a coffee cup, you put water in it, it takes the shape of the cup, right? Any water. You could take water that's shaped like a bowl and pour it in there, it'll take the shape of a cup. So any water will take the shape of the context that it's poured into, and any life, your life, the person next to you, my life, will take the shape of the context that we build for it. You create a context with your word. Again, you have the power of context. You have to be responsible for that you do it. That you created it. Nobody gave it to you. If your context is given to you by somebody else, by your church, by your religion, by your family, by your culture, by your ethnicity, then by your gender, by your status in society, if your context in life is given to you by something outside of your own heart, your own self, then I urge you to begin to question it. Unless, of course, you're totally happy, fulfilled, healthy, successful, turned on about life, and can't wait to have another day of it. In that case, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing something right. How you know that you're doing something right is you're happy and you feel good about it. Doesn't mean that you never have problems, but the problems are small inside of the context of your life. So using that example of a context holding things, if you had a big basket, you could put many kinds of fruits and things inside of it. It could also include, if you put every kind of fruit inside that basket, it might have some fruits that you liked better than others. And it might have some that you don't even like at all. Right? But somebody else might love that, so you can give that away. But my point in creating that ideal, if you will, is if your context is big enough for you to expand into your life, if your context is worthy of a life, your entire life, the next 50 years of your life, okay, if your context is worth giving your life for, then it will be big enough to contain within it things that you don't like, things that are upsetting, things that are disappointing, people that hurt you. All of those things will be included in that context. Like, yeah, if you had a big context big enough to make a huge difference in the world, is it possible that there would be people who might try to block you or get in your way? Or people who might stop you, or people who might lie to you, or people who might try to steal your ideas or money or energy or whatever? Yes? Yeah, sure, of course. If you're up to making a huge difference in the world, there's going to be people who are going to try to stop you. If your context is big enough, you will become what we call unstoppable. You can't stop an idea whose time has come. When an idea whose time has come is taken up by any person who says, this shall be, I will be responsible for making this happen, then it becomes unstoppable. And there will always be people who will say, no, you can't do that, or no, that doesn't work. You'll always have people like that. All of the great geniuses of the world, all of the great people that we hold in high esteem, that are history books are filled with, are people who took a stand for something, who created a context powerful enough for their life that would make a difference and change the world, and how many of them have been assassinated or blocked or imprisoned or, put away in some way? Now, I don't want to scare you off from creating a powerful context in your life, because sometimes people do come to harm. If you're making a big enough difference, somebody may actually try to stop you literally. That's happened in history. So the question is your context big enough to give your life for? Because either way, you're giving your life for something right now. Every one of you is having their life used up right now by something that is a context. Did you create that context, or did somebody else? That's all I want to ask you. Are you living inside a context that you're giving your life to right now? Every day, you give your time, your money, your energy, your love, your life force, and the seconds and minutes and hours and days of your life, the precious being that you are, for something. And I assert that most of you don't even know what you're giving your life for. Some of you don't even know what you're living for. Well, if I were to ask you right now, answer me, what is your life about? What is your life going to leave for future generations? What are you going to do with it? For the next 50 years of your life, what are you going to do? What are you going to give that precious time for that will leave a mark on the earth and that will leave you feeling happy and empowered, and like the last day of your life you look back and go, wow, that was great. That was awesome. What will have you look back on your life and know that you lived a life worth living? Because if you don't have a life that's given by something that's worth giving your life for, I know that's a complicated sentence, so let me see if I can say that more simply. If your life is not a life that's worth giving your life for, then you're already dead. And you just don't know it yet. So this show is about waking up and really beginning to create a context for your life that is worth living and worth a lifetime, worth giving a life for. Even if you're old and you go, well, I've already had my life. No, you haven't. You're still alive. You're listening to my voice. You're still here. And you have no idea how much longer you're going to live, really. You could live another 10 minutes or you could live another 10 years. Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. So what will you give the rest of your life for? And if you're young, what are you going to dedicate your life to that's worth it? That's really worth it. And that will make you unstoppable. Because I want to tell you something. People who have a powerful context for their life, they're a force to be dealt with. You may have met some people like that. And when you're in their presence, you know that this is a person that's up to something big. They're not to be messed with. And they are going to make something happen, whatever it is they say they're up to, no matter what. That is an exciting life worth living. That's a life worth giving a life for. And even if you were stopped dead in your tracks tomorrow, at any moment in a life lived like that, it's like, it was worth it. It was worth it. I'd do it again, right? So context is freedom. That's true freedom. True freedom is willing to give your all for a cause that you consider to be greater than your own life, than your own petty little self-concerns, and to freely give it. To freely give it. Context does not have any shape or form. It doesn't have a time or a place. If we cut you open and looked inside, we wouldn't see any context in there, right? If we looked all around, we wouldn't see any context on you, right? Context is shapeless, formless, and timeless. All right? And yet it allows for the content, that is to say the forces and circumstances and the conditions in which you live, the forces, the circumstances, and the conditions in which you live will begin to take the shape of the context that you have created for your life. Context generates the process, when you create a context for your life, it begins to generate circumstances and conditions. You begin to see the world in an entirely different manner. So when you see the world in a different manner, new opportunities and things that you would not have noticed before, that were always there waiting to happen, will begin to appear. And it'll seem like a coincidence, like, oh, isn't that funny? I just got through saying that I was going to do X, Y, and Z, and here are all the tools and resources I need to do X, Y, and Z. Or here's another person who's interested in doing that too. Or here's a whole group of people who are attracted to this idea that I said that I wanted to do. And so the resources and circumstances begin to fill the form of your context. In other words, context is decisive. It decides what content will go into it. They begin to reorder and align themselves with your context. If, for example, you begin to shift your context from, my life really doesn't have any meaning, or my life, I don't really actually make a difference, or I don't know what the purpose of my life is, or the context of my life is. If you begin to shift that to, I am somebody who makes a difference in life, I'm unstoppable, and I will make a difference in other people's lives and in my own life that causes the greatest freedom for all concerned. Something like that. In other words, I make a difference, right? If you shift the context of your life from I don't matter or I don't make a difference to I make a difference, then the circumstances of your life, while they may not actually change, in other words, you may still live at the same address, you may still have the same driver's license and social security number, you may still have the same credit score, okay? The circumstances of your life don't suddenly magically change, but they take on an entirely new meaning. The context will shift the meaning of your life, and this new meaning then begins to reflect that you do make a difference. In other words, you shift your context to I make a difference no matter what. The meaning that begins to become attached to all of the circumstances in your life take on the shape of and the meaning of that you actually do make a difference. So, I'd like to hear from some of you. If you've been listening to the show, I think I've talked enough, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'd like to hear what has opened up for you, anything that this has awoken in your thinking. And so if you have been listening, snap out of it, and you can give me a call. The lines are open. I'd love to hear from you and hear what you've got to say. Where has this opened up something in your life? Where do you see that you could cause a shift in the context of your life? Or maybe you have some questions like, okay, I heard this part and I understood that, but how could I do this, that, or the other? In other words, how can I create a context in my life? How can I really make a difference? How will I know if I've got the right one? You see? And so these are the kind of questions that people normally ask me when I have a conversation with them about the context in their life, like the purpose. So one of the things that opens up for people is that, wow, I've just been going along, living my life. The context or the purpose of my life, the meaning of my life has been given by, that I'm a mother or a wife or a husband or a daughter or a son, that I'm from this kind of family and we have this kind of income and we live in this part of the country or this country. And so what's available to me is different than what may be available to somebody else. So we tend to see life in terms of its limitations, and this whole conversation is designed to have you see past those apparent limitations and begin to declare boundaries and territory that is independent of the outside circumstances, and that give the outside circumstances a whole new meaning in your life. So I'd like to hear what you've got to say about that. You know, you have the power to determine the context and to own your own life and to give meaning to your own life. And that's what this whole thing is about. And I will tell you this, that in the seminars and the workshops and in the private sessions that we do at Embrace Growth, it is always going to be, we're always going to be looking for what will give you the most choice, what will give you the most freedom, what will give you the best ability to respond. In other words, what will make you more responsible, more responsible. And we're not talking about responsible like fault or blame or shame or guilt. We're talking, because that has nothing to do with responsibility. Fault, blame, shame, or guilt is reaction to circumstances. It's just a reaction to something that happened. It is not responsible to react. Reaction means to reenact something. Responsibility means to respond to something coming from a source that you have declared, coming from a meaning that you have declared. You can declare that you will always do what is the most honorable thing. That's a context that you could create for your life. Is that true? Is anybody said you should do it that way? Is there a law? No. It's only you saying, no matter what happens, no matter who it is, no matter the cost to me personally, I will do what is honorable because that is who I am. That's the context I choose to live my life inside of. What is the honorable thing to do? So that anytime I have doubt, anytime I have a question about, what is the right thing to do here, I'm always going to look for what is the most honorable thing that I could do that would have the greatest good for all concerned, even if sometimes I must be ruthless, and even if people may not like me, even if I may not be the most popular person, I will honor the integrity of what needs to happen here. So that's a context you could create for your life, and it's one of the contexts that we talk about and we explore in the Honor, Integrity, and Mastery workshop that I teach for men. You know, I think that particularly with regards to men, those distinctions of honor and integrity are what matter the most. When a man forsakes his honor, forsakes his integrity for a quick fix or a fast gratification, then eventually not only does he suffer, but society suffers. The women and the children that are associated with him begin to suffer. They experience a diminished trust and therefore a diminished love. When they have a diminished love, they have a diminished respect for the man. And so the man, when he forsakes his honor for anything, eventually begins to suffer because he feels less respect for himself and others feel less respect for him. He begins to respond to the world in a way that that will not bring him more power, more freedom, more love and respect and self-acceptance. So can you show the hymn poster? I have one that is coming up. I have a couple of Honor, Integrity, and Mastery workshops that are coming up. And the next one is in London on July the 19th through the 21st. I know that there are a number of people in Europe that are watching the show and they've wondered, when are we going to do it? Well, okay, this is our first ever London Honor, Integrity, and Mastery workshop, July the 19th through the 21st. If this is a great success, and I'm sure that it will be, there's already a number of men that are starting to fill up that workshop, then we'll come back and keep doing it in London. Otherwise, this may be the only one. Again, and then Toronto, don't take it down yet. We're going to Toronto on August the 23rd through the 25th, right after that. And then we'll be back in Los Angeles in November, the 15th through the 17th, for the Honor, Integrity, and Mastery workshop. So those are the next opportunities that you have. If you're a man and you want to master the distinctions of honor and integrity, I can tell you that you not only will become more attractive to the women in your life. Women love to be around men who have done this workshop. I can also tell you that the men who have done this workshop have gone on quite easily to become very successful. Because once you get your honor and your integrity together, then things start happening around you. And what men tend to do, the most outstanding thing that I have noticed about men, is that their wives tell me that they're completely in love with them. Their wives, their girlfriends, oh my God, what'd you do to my husband? He's like the most amazing man now. Sons and daughters are, begin to really admire the father, and that the men, on their part, they become very successful. Men tend to go out and become very successful if they're not already, and if they're successful already, then they become even more successful. I'm not kidding when I say that I've had at least 5 guys that have taken the workshops that within a year or two of taking the workshop, and in each case they were all like small-time businessmen or employees in which they were kind of wondering if they could afford to take a weekend off and pay for a workshop, are now multi-millionaires with multiple employees and several offices. So I can tell you that men tend to take charge of their life, become responsible, and start making a lot of money. That's not a promise. That doesn't happen for everybody, but that happened for a few of the guys.